What?
Annie didn't say when to
Yes,
come over.
right now we are recording.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you to founding partners and to sponsors. And so go ahead and do please mute yourself as we dive into the bulk of what we're going to be chatting about today.
So to mute ourselves.
Let's see. So today I want to share some of the work that a team that I work with.
You're muted. The presenter's muted.
Thank you. So this is
Excuse
work.
me, Deana. Yeah.
I think when you muted everyone, it muted me as well. So welcome to Navigating to Futures. This is work that the Special Projects Library Action Team has been investigating for the past 4 or 5 years. And myself and Annie Gaines both work at the Idaho Commission for Libraries, and we co-lead that team. And so they've been familiarizing themselves with the concepts of foresight and futures thinking, and thinking of ways that that is ways of thinking and activities and tools that be incorporated into the work that they do in libraries. And so I'm excited to get to share some of that with you here today. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to start off by doing a very brief introduction to what futures thinking and foresight is. Then we'll do an exercise that maybe you can use after today's presentation. And it's a way of looking at the past to help enlighten how you might move forward from where we are in the present. So we'll do some time travel, if you will. And then I have some great resources to share with you if this is content that resonates with you and something that you'd like to investigate further. And we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end. So feel free to put questions in the chat. Rosine will help me make sure that we surface those at the end of the presentation. Let's dive in. First up, if you would please, I would love to know what where you're feeling today with the future. So go ahead and put in the chat on a scale from 5 being the future is going to be amazing, down to 1 of oh my gosh, we are doomed, and everywhere in between. Nice. I'm encouraged to not see very many 1s in there. Nice work, everyone. But also understandable if you're kind of at the bottom of that range. So I want you to go ahead and remember that number because we'll come back to it at the end, all right? So let's just really briefly go over what futures thinking and foresight is so that we can all kind of start on the same page as we move forward. And I want you to think about futures thinking and foresight like a beam of light. So imagine you're in a dark forest and you have a headlamp on maybe, and looking out in front of you is a lighted area. And right in front of you is going to be very illuminated, right? Wherever you're looking. And as you get towards those ends, things are going to get a little fuzzier, maybe less easy to see. But then you also have the ability to shift where your focus is, right? And that's going to illuminate different possibilities moving forward because you can take a step into that darkness in whatever direction you want. So with that idea of that beam of light in mind, I'd like to show you the cone of plausibility, which is what this model looks like in kind of a more academic way. So on the left is where we are right now at this moment in time, and you'll see as we move forward in time, there are more and more possibilities, right? And there's a variety of possibilities there that you'll see on the right-hand side. On the edges of that cone of plausibility are what I like to refer to as the dumpster fire and the bunnies and unicorns scenarios. So there's the amazing things and there's the terrible things that might happen. And those are places that are great to acknowledge and investigate, but they aren't always the most useful places to really dwell in and spend a whole lot of time, but they can certainly inform some of those other futures in the middle. And this is a great thing I think about futures thinking and foresight, is that it's about imagining a variety of futures, and then you get to choose what your preferred future is. And you'll notice that that is somewhere in the range from probable to maybe preposterous, because you're getting to choose which one that is. And by choosing where you want to end up, that's going to help inform the steps that you need to take from where you are right now to where you want to be in that future state. So that's a really very quick introduction to futures thinking and foresight. And you might be asking yourself, what is the value in doing this work and taking the time to think about this? So glad you asked. The Institute for the Future has identified 7 key strengths that this work can really help bolster. And I imagine that these are key strengths that you wish you would develop in yourself. Maybe you wish some of your colleagues would develop in themselves. Certainly, if you're hiring someone, I bet that these are things you would like them to have. And I want you to focus on that mental flexibility one, because that can be extremely helpful in really unpredictable times. It means that you're able to pivot and adapt to changing situations, which certainly a lot of us were really flexing that mental flexibility during the pandemic, and certainly since then for a variety of reasons in our libraries. So think about those 7 strengths as we move forward into this activity. So let's do some time travel now. We're going to go back in time, and I want you to think about your library 20 years ago, or it could be maybe a library that you used to visit a lot, but think about a library about 20 years ago. And if it helps to focus, to get kind of a mental picture, you can focus on maybe the physical space or the staff, maybe the people that are using that space. So kind of think about what that looked like 20 years ago. And you're just holding this idea in your mind. And then I'm going to ask you to move forward in time to today and think about that same component or aspect. And what does that look like today? And so you're again kind of thinking in your mind, what does that thing 20 years ago look like now? Yeah, oh yes, definitely. So things about noise, physical collections, definitely in media, right? So what changed? What happened in the world to cause that change from 20 years ago to now? Yes, we're definitely more than books. Streaming, for sure. Ooh, a teen section. Oh my gosh. Teen sections, definitely 30, 40 years ago, were not something. Yeah. So thinking about what that thing is that changed, what happened in the world that impacted that change? And it can be multiple things. Yeah, definitely internet. Mobile tech, for sure. Yeah. Recession. It's a good one, Sarah. Yeah. And I'm going to guess that whatever you're thinking of, whatever that thing was that made that change happen, is one part of the STEEP analysis, which is another tool that futurists and foresight practitioners use. And it's basically a series of lenses to look at a potential future, or you could even use it to look at the past as well. So I'm guessing that there was some sort of societal, technological, environmental, economic, or political change that happened in the world to cause that change in your library, right? And it very well could be multiples of those. But this can be a tool going forward as a way to kind of investigate changes that you're thinking about maybe making at your library, and or looking outside of your library, and what is something that might change in that environment and what impact would that have on you. So think about that STEEP analysis when you're kind of moving into this next part. And so now I'm going to ask you to time travel into the future. So I want you to think about your library in 2035, so about 10 years from now. What is an ideal future for either the physical space, the staff, or the people using the space? So you could also think of this as what's a wish or a hope or an aspiration? So go ahead and put in the chat. What is your hope for? Yes, definitely more space for people, building. Yes, fully accessible spaces everywhere. Yeah. Ooh, flexibility. Yes. So funny that the mental flexibility and the physical flexibility, right? Ooh, Caroline, I love that. Ooh, yes, lots of stuff about hours and access. These are great ideas, everyone. Cool. So I want you to think about that future state that you're excited about. What is the last thing that needs to happen before you would say to yourself, oh my gosh, we got here. We got to this future ideal library that I wanted. What's kind of that last switch? Funding. Yep. Support. What does support mean? Funding of what? Strategic planning. So thinking about like strategic planning, but so if you got funding, it isn't that then the next day all of your problems would go away, right? So thinking a little more specific about what is that last thing that we need to happen. Yeah, yes, keeps up with inflation for sure. So think about that. What's that last bit to move for you to be like, yes, we got here. And then I invite you to come back, time travel into the present. And what is the first step? What is something that you could do this month, big or small, to move towards that ideal future and maybe even address what that last thing is that needed to happen to get you there? What's one thing that you could do? Love it, Amber. Engage community. Think about the future. Yeah, Misty, partnering with folks. Yeah. Ooh, tell the library story. Talk to supporters. Ooh, yes, aligning programming with strategic plan. These are great, everyone. That's really specific, Kelly. Solar panels and the board. Nice. Yes, and starting small is a great thing to do, especially if, sometimes the bigger the lift, the smaller the first step might be to move you towards that. I like that there's a lot of talk about community engagement, and I think that really shines a light on the idea that this isn't work that you're going to do alone, right? You're going to need some help. These are great, everyone. Nice. I look forward to arriving at that future with you, and I'm excited for that first step that you're going to take here in the next month. So what we did is we reflected on the past. That can be an easy place to start because we've been there. And there might be a certain amount of comfort for folks in thinking about where we were, and then inviting people to think about how things are now versus how they were can also be a great way to show how far we've come. Sometimes thinking about a future state can be really overwhelming, and helping people realize that, we can do hard things and we've already done them before because look at where we are now, can be a way to then start talking about where you want to be in the future. And so then coming up with what that ideal is at the end, and then working your way back kind of from there, is also a way to help, especially if it's a team, keep everyone focused on what that end state is that you're looking for. And that can kind of be your guiding light as you move forward, working towards that preferred future. Cool. So next I want to share some further tools that you might use. If this is a process that is interesting to you and something that you'd like some more information about. So the first thing I want to share is a couple of classes that you can take. The first one is free and it's from the Institute for the Future, and it is led by Jane McGonigal, who I think it was maybe Joyce mentioned in the keynote, who's from the Institute for the Future. And it's a great free Coursera course that's an introduction to this way of thinking and how to incorporate these tools and systems into what you do. And if you're looking for something a little beefier, you can do the University of Houston's Foresight Certificate, which is what Annie and I did. And that takes much more of a deep dive into these concepts and gives you the opportunity to really apply some of that learning to what you're doing. Of course, I'm going to give you some reading options, and the first one I want to tell you about is the newsletter that the Special Projects Library Action Team, or SPLAT, has, and that's something that comes out every 2 weeks. I encourage you to subscribe to that. That's where they share their learning and kind of scanning of trends and things that are kind of resonating with them that are happening across libraries. And then Teach the Future and Dr. Peter Bishop are a group and a person who have been very instrumental in this work for Annie and I, and has been a wonderful collaborator. I highly recommend checking out his newsletter. And then there's also the Futures Thinking Playbook, which is available online, but you can also buy copies of it. And it is a series of activities that you can do to work through this process. And then Imaginable is a wonderful book by Jane McGonigal that highly recommend also. It has the way that it's organized is there's activities that you can kind of dip into, so you don't necessarily need to read the whole thing at once. So a great way to kind of pick up, get inspired, try some stuff, see how it goes, and come back to it. And then also the Institute for the Future has a newsletter. And then lastly, if you're really wanting to dive into the deep end, there are some activities and ways that you can play with this. And the first one listed there, the first two are from the Situation Lab, which is a great group of folks who are creating these wonderful ways of engaging with futures thinking in really kind of imaginative and participatory ways. Lots of fun. In fact, the Futures Bazaar is the basis for a toolkit that Annie and Splat and I are working on for a toolkit called Things from Future Libraries, which will be a participatory design toolkit of how to engage your community in imagining what your future library might look like. That will be coming out in the spring, so subscribe to the Splat newsletter if you're interested in knowing when that comes out. Teach the Future has a whole website of these resources. And the UK government came up with a really cool toolkit that has some of these activities in it as well, that are a nice way to kind of play around with different ways of using these in different settings in the work that you do. And certainly all of these resources are going to be available when the slides go out. Also, many of them are linked on the Splat website. So what this might look like, first, easiest thing you could do is maybe take a moment every day where you can ask yourself, how am I feeling about the future? That's a way to reflect and even just start making thinking about the future a part of your regular daily practice. Next, you could think about doing some of those activities with colleagues or friends or your community. And that could even look like if you're the head of a team, maybe you've got a whiteboard in your group area and you put a question on there every week that is somehow connecting to the future and getting your staff thinking about that. And if you want to really dive in, you can hold a workshop. So there are libraries in Maryland that held like a Futures Day where they invited the community in to do a variety of activities based around futures thinking and foresight. You could do all of the plays from the playbook. You could also do a 1 or 4 hour design session, either with staff which Annie and I have done with staff at libraries in Idaho, or you could do it with your community as well. So there's a wide range of ways that you could incorporate this into what you're doing. And of course, I would be happy to chat with you more if this is something that you're interested in looking into. So with that, I want to do a vibe check again. How are people feeling now about the future? So if you're feeling, if you think your number's gone up, put a plus in and or the number. If it's gone down, which is totally possible, put a negative and what your number is now. And it might be the same, which is fine. Nice, great, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you in the future, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or Rosine, if there were any that came through in the chat. If not, I'll see you in some other sessions today.
Thank you so much, Deana. That was a wonderful presentation, and I'm also very excited for the future. Personally, I'm always very hopeful, as I'm sure our ancestors would be thrilled to see our today's lives. So I think it would be even better in the future. So we are now open to all the questions you might have. And I'm just looking at the chat. And we don't have a question yet, but yes, the chats will be available with the recording, and you can just access the recording online.
And I think the recordings will be available like a week from now, is what it sounded like they were looking at doing.
Correct. Yes, it will take about a week to be available.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, how can we make the future better? Well, the future isn't here yet, so there is no better or worse because it hasn't happened. And so I would say that one of the things that you can do to, but if you are feeling that you want the future to be better than where we are now, one of the things you can do is identify for yourself or your community what that future that is better than where you are now looks like, and start thinking about ways to put in supports, systems, tools to help get you to that future. And identifying if there are roadblocks that might be in the way to help to getting you there, and if there are things that you can do to either navigate around them, figure out how to blast through them. Maybe you end up partnering with them and have them come along with you on the journey. But I think the first step to getting towards a future that you're excited about is starting to think about what you want that to look like.
Yes.
Oh, PF, I feel you. Yep, a 5 and a 1 at the same time. They're definitely, you know, are we, what future are we talking about? Are we talking about my personal future? Are we talking about like future of libraries and work? And, you know, depending on what domain, definitely I have different feelings as well. Glenn, let's see, futures thinking in a large library versus rural. So I have seen it done at both here in Idaho. So I went and did a one-day staff training at one of the largest library systems in the state, which granted Idaho, so not as big as other states, but that was, I think that was around 100 staff or so. And so that was coming in and doing one of those participatory exercises. And then in smaller communities, there are some libraries that have really, really been taken with Jane McGonigal's book, Imaginable, and they're using that as a tool to kind of do activities with staff periodically. So I know the director there is kind of incorporating some of those into like their staff meetings. So they kind of do one of those exercises at the beginning of their staff meetings. Happy to chat more. Feel free to send me an email. I'm on LinkedIn. Love to chat with folks more about this. I know we had a really short time today.
Well, we still have another 3 minutes. And Edward is saying, combining this with introduction to AI tools for a whole series. Caroline is saying futures training should be an high school course. And then Katie is having a question here. I love the community that we have here. I would love to continue to bounce ideas off each other. Is there a place on the Library 2.0's website for group discussions? And yes, you can be a member of Library 2.0, and we will be, and you can be in contact via LinkedIn and on social media.
And Katie, there's also Caroline responded that LinkedIn, yes, there are some great futurists that share content on LinkedIn, so that can be, and so just searching for the tag futurist would be a way to find them.
And P.F. Anderson is saying, I am an emerging technologies informationist. So this is what I do every day. This is amazing. And yeah, then so far we don't have other questions. Oh yeah, we have from Rebecca. I have been reflecting on foresight could have helped equip us better to meet some of our current challenges, staffing issues mainly. Do you have any areas of foresight focus for current library leaders?
Rebecca, what a great question. And yes, I also wish that that you had maybe had these tools, because I feel you on that hindsight, right? Of being like, oh, if only we'd thought about this before. I think as far as area of focus, I think that is really going to depend on your community if I understand what you're asking. So as far as what are things going on in your community that you can see that are maybe going to have an impact on you down the road. I could also encourage you to go back to that idea of the STEEP analysis and maybe coming up with how that relates specifically to your community might be a way to start thinking about things a little more locally. You know, I don't know, like thinking about the economic impact. Did you have one really big employer in your community? What would happen if that employer had to close for some reason? Here in Idaho, a major road washed out to a small community in a different state. And so people that worked in that community had to add at least like, I think 2 or 3 hours to their commute. Those are things, excuse me, that would be part of that STEEP analysis to think about.
Thank you so much, Deana. We really appreciated this wonderful presentation. We need to wrap up here, unfortunately. And if we have any other questions, please reach out to Deana Brown via email, on LinkedIn, or on other social media. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our conference today. And we hope you continue to just participate to other conferences going on today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Deana.
Thank you, Rosine. You're a great moderator. I'll see you around.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.